Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be picking this Assa 700, which is a Swedish oval format lock. This is the second Assa 700 that I've picked, but this one is slightly different than the other one, so I wanted to take a quick moment to get it on video and talk about it a little bit. So these locks can be pinned up in a couple different ways. Well, I guess they can be pinned up multiple different ways because they're somewhat old and sometimes locksmiths kind of did some weird stuff. But properly pinned, the way that these locks should function is there's going to be gin spools or Christmas trees in 1, 2, 4, and 6. And those are going to match up to milling in chambers 1, 2, 4, and 6 in the plug. Then you're going to have tapered pins, generally in 3, 5, and 7. This particular lock just has a standard in 7, which is pretty normal as well. So if you follow the Lockpickers United ranking system for single pin picking, these locks are considered to be red belt unless they have 2 or more Christmas tree spools instead of plain gin spools in them. So this one has 4 Christmas trees. And the Christmas trees make it a little bit more difficult because in addition to having to pick the gins out of the milling, you also have to lift them past this middle section where they act a little bit more like a spool. So it does add a little bit of difficulty to picking these locks. But even with just 4 gins, these locks are very difficult to pick. When I actually picked this lock, I did not do any kind of running commentary at all. So it's a little bit of a boring section. So I'm going to actually insert between this and the pick just some quick discussions of kind of the theory of picking the tapered pins and then the theory of picking out the Christmas trees or the gin spools. So just as a quick reminder, the tapered pins make this difficult because they, as the name implies, they taper at the bottom here. So as you're lifting them, they may bind in the middle, but then when you get to this section where they are tapered, they stop binding. And so you have to kind of bounce back and forth between the pins to get them all picked and get the gins up into the milling so that you can get a false set and start working on the gins. Now, the gins make this difficult because the bottoms of them are specifically designed to match with the milling inside of the plug. And as you rotate, they move over and they get locked into that milling. And they don't provide counter rotation like a spool would. Once they're locked into that section, you have to manually counter rotate the plug and tap them out in something called float picking, which I'll talk about. When they're caught in this middle section, you actually do get some counter rotation generally, and so it's a little easier to get them out. But it does add some difficulty because you have to pick them past this thicker part right here, this first tier, and that can cause you to drop some tapereds or drop some other gins that you've set, which is why having more Christmas trees is considered to make this lock more difficult to pick. These are just some anti-drill things. They kind of fit in these holes right here. They don't do anything. That's why they're not in the pinning tray, if you were curious. So I think that's all the stuff I wanted to talk about in this particular section. So I'm going to get this up, repinned and up into the vise. And I'll do, again, a quick section, just theory of picking the tapereds and getting into a false set, and then a little bit on the theory of setting the gins, and then I'll have the pick and gut of the lock at the very end. Okay, so the first thing you need to do when picking one of these locks is you need to get it into a false set by lifting all the tapered pins. What I've done here is I've put a mark on the plug and a mark on the body that shows me how far the lock rotates when nothing is lifted. So I know if I can get this mark to go past the one on the body, I'm in a false set. So the first thing I'm going to do, just using a regular short hook, is I'm going to lift the tapered pins. So I'm going to start with 3. I'm going to go to 5, come back to 3, and I got a little bit of movement, but not a lot. Now I know in this lock, sometimes I can feel the middle of the trees binding, and I can lift them at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. and you'll see I'll probably get a little bit of counter rotation, and the tapereds will drop a tiny bit, and I will have to go back and reset them. But if I can get some of those Christmas trees set to the middle level before I get the tapers all set, it's actually going to make my life a little easier later on. So as always, you know, do the jiggle test, pick what feels like it's binding. Don't get caught up in picking the lock in a specific order just because that's what worked before or that's what people told you to do. You really have to feel kind of what's going on. I'm using a slightly deeper hook for pin 7 in this lock because it is all the way in the back and it is a higher lift. Okay. So stuff is starting to feel loose in here. I don't want to overset anything, so I'm being kind of wary about some of the tapered pins. But I do think I'm getting close to getting this into a false set. So again, just continuing to jiggle test the pins, being particularly careful of the tapereds, and just seeing what feels like it's binding. And you will have to tap many of these pins multiple times to get them to set correctly. Okay, there we go. So I just need to push up on pin 7, but you heard a click, and now you can see I've moved my plug mark well past where it was originally, so that tells me I have a false set. So from this point on, the idea is setting the gins. So in order to do that, I'm going to take a second tensioner and stick it in the bottom of the lock here. So now I can float pick it, right, by going back and forth. I have full control over where the plug is. And essentially, I don't want to rotate this mark back past where it was originally because I'll end up dropping the tapereds. So what I want to do is make sure that I don't over-rotate back the other direction. Now, in order to figure out which gin you should be working on, you essentially let off some of the tension and tap it. And you might not be able to see it, but what I'm feeling for is my tapping being translated directly into the plug. And that means that something is caught up in the milling. So that's 6. That is giving me a lot of feedback right there. 2, a little bit, but not so much. 1, not so much. 4, a little bit, but I really think it's 6 is the one that's giving me the most. So what I'm going to do here is make sure I'm on 6. I'm going to rotate back slowly, and then I'm going to tap on the pin, and I'm going to tap on it from multiple directions, and I'm trying to knock that gin out of the milling so that I can lift it, and then rotate the plug back. And then I'm going to test the pins again. Same thing, letting off a little tension, feeling like if my tapping motion is being translated directly into the plug by having plug movement. And if that's the case, then rotating slowly back and tapping on that pin to see if I can lift it. So that's the idea behind setting a gin. A lot of it is based on feel. So even though you can see what I'm doing and copy it directly, it may not actually help you until you've done it a couple times on your own and practiced it. So right there, I got a lift on 2 and moved it. So now I can feel the pins in a very different spot. It may not be set yet, but I at least got it lifted past its first tier. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to test them all again and keep going just like that. But that's the basic idea of setting a gin. So step 1, you got to get into that false set. Step 2, you got to set all the gins, and then you should get the lock open. So that's the theory. Next section, I'm actually going to pick the lock. Again, no commentary while I'm doing it, but hopefully you'll see me doing the same things that I was doing here in this close-up, and it'll make a little bit more sense. It's open again. Let's not take the lock out of frame when I got it this time, shall we? Okay. Clearly open. Thank you. Demon lock, forged in the fires of hell. I'm gonna relock it. Okay. This is my second time gutting this in the last half hour. I'm gonna attempt to do it this time without accidentally moving the lock out of frame while I am attempting to show the orientation of the gens, because that is what I did before. So let's get the shim in here. I'm going to turn it this way. Shim in. Turn it. Okay. Do not move the lock out of frame. Where are my tweezers? Okay, here we go. Tree number 1. Slowly, so I show the orientation of the trees. Spring number 1. Tree number 2. Spring number 2. Tree, oh no, this is not a tree. This is going to be a tapered. Orientation is less important, but it's there. Spring number 3. Another tree. Coming up. You can see the orientation of the tree there. Spring. Tapered pan. Spring. And finally, well, not finally, but the last tree at least. Okay, you can probably see the orientation of the tree there past my thumb. And the last pin is neither tapered nor tree. Whoops, it's just a regular pin. And the spring. Okay. Key pins. Oh, that was an anti-drill. That was an anti-drill. Okay, I'm going to show the milling in the chamber. So you can see it there. Gin milling chambers 1, 2, 4, 6. And it's still in good shape. Close up of the pins. 4 trees, 2 tapereds, 1 standard, bunch of torpedoes, which I thankfully did not overset. There are no shenanigans in here. I did not grub this. And I think that's everything. Okay, 4 Christmas tree, Assa 700, black rated lock, picked. That went much better than last time. I'm gonna watch this video, and if it went out of frame again, I'm going to scream. So hopefully it did not go out of frame again. But there you go. That is the lock, picked, gutted. Thank you.